Hey guys, do you work in emergency medicine? An absolutely crazy and intense environment where you see things every day that a regular person doesn't see once in their entire life? You feel burned out, unappreciated, like there's no one you can talk to about the things you are struggling with? Well, you are not alone. I have a bunch of real professionals with real stories here with me today that can relate to your struggles. I've struggled with burnout, discouragement, frustration many times and still struggle with it. My name is Aaron. I've been in emergency medicine for 15 years as an EMT paramedic and now emergency medicine PA, and I am the host of Practical EMS Podcast. And with that, I will introduce my guests and we will get started. I want to ask Doug and Sarah a question that we talked about last time. I've been asking everybody that comes on the show because I think it's an interesting topic, but do you think there is a God? Do you not think there's a God surrounding emergency medicine? Has emergency medicine convinced you that for sure there's not a God? Has it convinced you that there is a God? We kind of led with the question, where's God in emergency medicine? I think it's kind of an interesting topic, so I'd like to hear what you guys have to say on that.
Putting us on the spot with religious
I was like, that's
like,
a big question.
Shithead.
Last time I gave nobody any warning as well.
So I saw that question. I'm like, I'm not sure how to respond to that. You know, number one is I'm a believer in science, but I'm also a believer in God. But I'm not a super religious person, meaning I don't go to church all the time. I don't do those things. I don't pray. So people say, you know, do you believe in God or not? And I guess if I had to say yes or no and there's no wiggle room in the middle, I'd say yes. Mm-hmm. Do I see that God helps people in the ER? No, I don't. I see that if there is some type of religious overtone or some type of divine intervention, that it's for whatever reason is felt necessary in the religious eyes. Meaning if someone dies, well, they were meant to die for this reason. Mm-hmm. If they pull through, I most of the time will rack that up to medicine saved them and not God saved them. And I don't know how much of that's true, how much of that isn't true. I know everybody believes different things. But I do know that there has been a case that we have seen where we pronounced this guy dead.
A couple times.
And this guy was dead for 30 minutes. I'm not shitting you. He was in trauma bay. We thought he'd had a big heart attack. He was not that old. He was dead. Monitors, flatline, no dead, no response, no nothing. Mm-hmm. Sat in that room for another 20 minutes, still dead.
So it's like moved him
over. Yeah, moved him over into the consult room so the family could be with him. And then family comes out after about 10 minutes, said, "Hey, he's talking." We're like,
no
we're like,
way.
Okay, family needs to go to the psych place because you know the family's hallucinating. We walk in there and this son of a bitch is sitting up.
Hell no.
Yeah. So we're like, I mean, I don't really know how to explain that.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably one of the few cases where I can look at that and say, well, there's no medicine there.
He did that twice, I think.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've seen The Walking Dead. I ain't fucking with that. But that's incredible.
It was right after Clint got there.
Was it? It's been a while.
Yeah. That's insane.
Because Heidi was telling me about that.
I've used that story several times.
Yeah.
When we were talking.
That's
about
the one time I've ever heard of something like that. I mean, there's a lot of times where someone's been dead for 20 minutes. Y'all bring them in and they're coding them. I code them. Nothing. 20 minutes later, you're like, we're going to check one last time just for the sake of the family.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, shit, they have a pulse back. And now all of a sudden they're breathing. And now all of a sudden, then they go upstairs. I'm like, well, I don't think that was necessarily God.
Yeah.
So in answer to your question of, do I think God exists in the emergency room? I think for a very select few patients that may be something, but the majority of it, of what we do, and I believe in the medicine, I believe in the data, as far as what we do to help people. And I think the majority of anybody that gets better is from what we do and not necessarily from some divine intervention. Doesn't mean I don't believe in God. Doesn't mean I don't think religiousness plays a role in it. But for the most part, I think it's medicine. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's an insane story, though.
Yeah.
That's
I like
insane.
it kind of relates to what Nathan said last time about this kind of question is
What did I say last time?
people are praying for God to help them, right? And you're like, well, I'm going to help you.
Yeah.
And so guess what? I'm kind of your answer to
I'm
prayer.
kind of
So
your
you're-
answer right now, bro.
You're gonna continue being religious because here I am. I'm gonna fix this situation. I like that perspective because I am a Christian, so I believe God's involved in some way, shape, or form. I just don't think things go according to God's will all the time because I think free will means people are allowed to stab each other to death.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
God doesn't want that, but we're allowed to stab each other to death. And so that happens. And God says, all right, you have free will. But I like that perspective of like, you know, we were praying for help. It's like, well,
I'm
here
the
I
best
am.
you got.
Yeah, I'm going to shock you back to life or whatever.
Yeah.
And God's not the one doing this. I'm pushing the button. Maybe he's using me. Maybe there's not a God and I'm just doing it. But I kind of like, I was listening back to what you said about that. And I kind of like that perspective. And it sounds like you kind of think similar, like,
Yeah.
this is going to be the medicine doing this, but if you want to keep believing in God because I shocked you back to life.
And I've heard it mainly with what people call psychiatric. I don't like that word because like when I hear psych, it makes me feel crazy. I'm sure I know you guys know because you were here last time. I like emotional emergencies. That's just a preference of mine. I've usually heard that on those types of calls whenever, you know, the department or somebody else is just sitting there like, oh, I'm just going to droperidol them or I'm just going to Versed them. Okay, let's talk to the person first. They literally might have just had the shittiest day of their lives. Just because you think it's a problem doesn't mean they don't. Like I could throw the soda at a wall, get different answers from you guys, different reactions. Just because I'm calm, maybe Casey gets an adrenaline rush. Maybe you laugh. Maybe you get scared. Maybe you just go like, why the fuck did you do that? Same situation, 4 different reactions. So it's the same thing. It's different with emotional stuff, and especially with emotions. It's such a different concept. It's such a hard topic with it. So I would usually get those things with those ones who literally almost started a shotgun, or like, an elderly woman who is getting abused, or a grandfather who their son won't come out when they're dying. And then I resemble their son, so I stay with them while they die. You know, that's usually when I get that kind of stuff. But that's actually why I joined medicine, for that kind of shit. But yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about it. It's like, well, I'm the best you got, so I'll do my best. If anything bad happens, we'll talk about it.
What you got, Sarah?
Go, Sarah.
Well, I think it kind of factors in what everyone has been saying too. I think I definitely believe very heavily in my Christian faith and in God. And I see it as a double-edged sword in a lot of situations because I personally believe that God is very intimately at work in everybody's life. But I also recognize that if you're going to believe that about the beautiful things, the times when medicine works, I believe that God works in people's experience, and I believe it works in the science. God has given us a science to learn and to be able to use and to advance. And I understand then that has its own kind of negative factor when you get the awful stories that come in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he could have stopped this.
Mm-hmm.
He absolutely could have stopped whatever situation. He could have stopped this person from abusing or drinking drunk or driving drunk. And that's honestly been my biggest struggle, is recognizing if God is so in control.
Yeah.
God is so in control.
Yeah.
And it's been something where my faith is really the only way I think I can still work in medicine, because there are so many stories and there's so many instances where you get a catastrophic trauma and they make it and they recover beautifully. And you get someone who falls down the steps, catastrophic C2, and they die immediately.
Yeah.
And I'm just lost. Why would this happen and not that? And anytime I try to predict an answer or an outcome, I'm almost always wrong, in that I have multiple times had pretty terrible traumas come in. There's no way. There's no way they're going to survive. Like, it's almost my jaded apathy, I suppose, of like protecting myself. Like, well, you're done. And they come back and they're like, no, they're alive. They're doing so well. And it's the beauty of medicine. And it's also the beauty of humanity that you cannot predict like that millimeter to the side injury that could have absolutely killed you.
Mhm.
But it is, while it's also my greatest point of compassion and the way that I'm able to cope in medicine, it's also one of the biggest things I've struggled with. I've had patients who they came in, we pronounced them dead from a certain accident or scene, and then the next person came in is the person who caused that accident.
Mhm.
And I'm devastated. Like
Yeah.
I can't see straight. I can't see the justice. I can't see the beauty of it.
Mhm.
I can't see anything redemptive in it. And it's honestly having your people you can talk to, like you talked about, of being able to cope. And so I have family members in the police department. And so they certainly have a lot of experience with their own struggles. And so I called up my brother and I'm like, I need you to tell me that there's going to be justice. I need you to tell me that this person is getting arrested, that they are never going to hurt anybody else, and that this is not going to happen again. And he's like, I can't do that, Sarah. He's like, I cannot tell you that there's going to be justice this side of, he's a Christian. He was like, I can't tell you there's going to be justice this side of heaven, but I can tell you that I believe that God is keeping a record and that there will be justice someday. And it wasn't enough in the moment, but it was something it takes me out of the equation of being God. I can't control every aspect of this, but I can leave it. There is a God and I'm not it.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps me in my being able to leave work at work, because if I'm in a situation and I'm in every situation for a reason, I believe, then if I'm not in a situation, I wasn't meant to be there. And if I was in a situation and I effed up, I can learn something. And if I'm in a situation and I made a difference, God gave me that knowledge. He gave me the previous experience to be able to do my best, hopefully make a difference. And still, I'm not in control of everything. And it really, ultimately, and I don't judge anyone. I don't think that's our point or our purpose, to sit here and look at people who think differently. I think it's a beautiful combination of humanity, honestly, when we can have two differing perspectives and we can still come together and do our best in whatever situation. I see it a lot more than just a coping mechanism for myself. I mean, it affects every single thing that I do. But I think that God is very present, and it's really, quite honestly, changed a lot of the different ways that I look at traumas or end of life situations. In that, I think people's spirits are present. I do not like the consult room. I don't like going in there. It's cold. It's weird. And I believe that there are spirits, not that I can necessarily pinpoint a specific situation.
Oh, I'm bringing a Ouija board next time.
But goodness, I've seen enough where I'm like, if anybody even shakes the stretcher and I'm in the room, I'm out. Like, like I have enough situations where I'm like, I don't have answers and I have a lot of questions. But I think it's interesting. I do believe that people's spirits can probably see the situation in the trauma base. And I don't really talk about it a whole ton, but if we're pronouncing somebody, or if we are pretty close to our ACLS and we're asking any other thoughts, any other options, I'm usually sitting there and I'm praying, because what harm does it do, truthfully?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can make a difference. And at the very least, I hope that their soul can feel my soul, hoping and wishing them and praying for them to the next life. So
That's beautiful.
Yeah, thanks for
Honestly.
sharing that.
Yeah.
You touched on something that I think is so hard about our job sometimes. It's the fact that we deal with the abused and the abuser in the next room oftentimes, especially in the ER where we have so many rooms. It's a common scenario where we're dealing with such injustice. And I think that's what makes a lot of people question, like, where is God in this? Like, this doesn't make any sense. This is totally unfair. Like, if I were God, this would be an easy solution, right? And like, I ran this call working in EMS. Like, I'm sure you guys, when you drive around town, you can see every call at every little intersection. I mean, if you do this long enough, like, there's something that's happened at every intersection in town. So when you're driving around in your regular vehicle, you're like, I remember somebody died when they hit that pole or whatever. And there's an intersection in town I always think about when I drive through, because it was like 2 a.m. Me and my partner were sitting in the ambulance at post, and we got the call for a motor vehicle accident literally just across the street. Like, we just have to switch out of this parking lot and we're there. And it's 2 a.m. We're like, we're going to be there 5 minutes before the fire department. We're like, and it's hard being first on scene. But so we pull up, and this lady had got ejected from the vehicle, head first into a pole, her brains everywhere. And the drunk driver is also, you know, out of the vehicle, sitting, probably has a broken femur. He's sitting on the sidewalk, and you're like, this guy's the one that caused the accident. He's going to be alive and fine. This passenger, maybe she was sober, maybe she wasn't. She's an innocent, and she's dead. And you're like, and this guy, he looked it up at us, and he was sober enough to say, will you guys please just kill me? Like, he knew, you know, what he had done. And I don't know, you just look at scenarios like that, and it's like, things are just not fair. Things are not, there's no justice sometimes. And it's such a hard thing to deal with, I think, when we see it so crystallized in emergency medicine, where we're taking care of both people. And it's like, yeah, man, you screwed up tonight, and, you know, her death's kind of on your hands. Like, you chose to drive intoxicated and you killed somebody, you know, and now we're going to take care of you because she's DOA and we're going to move on. But I always think about that call, because there's always flowers at that, you know, light pole where she hit. And every time I drive through there, I'm just like, oh man, that call was a tough one. You're trying to triage, and you're like, well, triage done.
Yeah.
And,
black, dead.
Yeah. It's, being first on scene's hard for that reason sometimes. So I have to give kudos to the fire department when they're on scene first a lot of the time, and they have to deal with that stuff. Sometimes on the ambulance, you're a little bit isolated from that, but everything you hear today from myself and my guests is opinion only. It does not represent any organizations or companies that any of us are affiliated with. The stories you hear have been modified to protect patient privacy, and any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental only. This is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and should not be taken as medical advice nor used to diagnose any medical or healthcare conditions.
That's kind of how I feel with that whole baby in an oven call. I'm like, that's just not fair at all. You know, because like, we still had to help the mom because she had abdominal pain, but it's like, why the fuck would that happen? You know? So, or it's like, you know, parents to children or sexual assault to this person, and the other person's like, oh, I have a broken arm. Well, why? Well, I just tried to attack her. What the hell do you think was going to happen? Good for her. But then we still have to sit here and do our job, you know? But yeah, drunk drivers, I definitely hear you on that one, because it's just like, oh, I thought I was okay. Well, you're not, and now your friend's dead.
Yeah.
Or they're drunk driving and they have like a truck with a bed, and then they go 90 flip, and then people are just getting yeeted. And then you're like, and then my heart always sinks whenever there's a kid's seat in the back, and then we're like, where's the fucking child? And it's like, oh, sorry. Well, you just killed your 2-year-old. So, oh, by the way, your Amazon shipment shipped. I don't know what you bought, but it shipped. I got a notification.
Oh,
it went away. It went away.
Thank God it didn't give specifics.
Right?
So, who's Randy?
I think getting back to the topic, Aaron knows where I stand on this. You know, I love Jesus, but I cuss a little.
Didn't notice.
Yeah, but I've got some pretty strong feelings as far as God and what we do. I got to tell you, every day before I work, I say a prayer every day that the people that I work with are safe. The people that I take care of, I can take care of the best that I can do.
Yeah.
Right. I ask that I be the best paramedic that I can be every shift. And I've been blessed because I see these calls, that call that in particular, I use it all the time.
That's insane.
You know, we were up with a bunch of, and I've told this story before, up with a bunch of paramedics, and we were up on the side of the mountain. We were riding bikes. We were up at Winter Park, and God, it was a beautiful day. And I just looked up and I said, man, God is great. You know, and one of the paramedics goes, you believe in God? And I said, yeah, I do. He goes, with all the stuff we see, how can you believe in God? And I said, with all the stuff we see, how can you not?
That's a
You know,
valid retort.
And you know, and I agree with you. I think that if they survive, it's because of the science. But who created that science? You know, and you know, I look at the universe. You know, that did not happen by a bunch of gas. It didn't. You know, life doesn't come from inanimate matter. It doesn't. Life comes from life, and some sort of intelligent being had to do that. So you can't put a bunch of watch parts in a box, shake it around,
Challenge
put it
accepted.
on, and shake it for a billion years, and it become a watch. Can't do it. And if you look at the universe, it's a big watch. That's what it looks like. So anyway, there's parts. But anyway, those are the things. But getting back to situations, my oldest son that had cancer, his best friend got in a really bad industrial accident, really bad, down in Arizona. And so we loaded up the car. We went down there. We walked into Scottsdale Osborne's trauma center, walked into the ICU, and I took one look at him. His head was this big, trach, and the fire guys were on top of it. Mesa Fire, man, they did a great job on this guy, and they got a crike on him right away. Got his airway, and flew him out to Scottsdale. And I walked into that ICU, and he's laying there just posturing.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, I walked outside, and I told my ex-wife, my first wife, Debbie, I said, he's not going to make it through this. He's just not. I said, he is so head injured that he's not going to make it through. And we stayed there for about a week, and we didn't want to leave because I thought we're going to get back to Colorado and we're going to be turning right around for a funeral. And lo and behold, he was stubborn, and he didn't.
Holy shit.
He didn't die. A couple months later, he was completely blind, and he still had his trach in. A couple months later, he was doing some Ahmed stuff, or some physical therapy. His therapist was late. He'd had a car issue. Well, Gino was a master mechanic, this kid. And so his mom was like, well, ask Gino what it is. And so Gino had been writing on a tablet. He couldn't see, but he could, he could write. And so he said, so the guy described what it was that was wrong with his car. And Gino goes, like that. And he writes ball joints. It's ball joints. So he takes it to the mechanic, and sure enough,
Just ball joints.
And so anyway, he recovers. He goes to this blind school in Louisiana, and we stopped to see him. We were on a road trip, and we stopped to see him in Ruston, Louisiana. And he had bullied the administrators. They were teaching him how to do machine work, computer stuff, and how to machine with that. And he said, I'm a mechanic. I need to do some mechanic work. He goes, can you find me a mechanic job? And they asked like 3 or 4 mechanic places in Ruston. And they all said no, except for one guy. And he said, yeah, I'll give him a shot. So he tells Gino, he goes, all right, you're in the middle of the room. He said, over on your right is a coveralls. Over on your left is a full cabinet of tools, whatever you can need. He said, there's a 350 small block engine on a stand in the middle of the room here. He goes, find out what's wrong with it. And he did. And he told us, because we talked to this mechanic, and he goes, he's so gifted, this kid. He goes, he said he tore that engine apart, figured out what was wrong with it, fixed it, and got it back together faster than any 2 of my sighted mechanics could put together.
Wow. That's awesome.
And so this guy, he ended up, he's a VW guy. He ended up making 2 sandrails for Stevie Nicks' dad and brother, actually down there, but as a blind kid. Anyway, so I told Gino, I asked him one day, I said, hey, Gino, I said, I'm really sorry this happened to you. And he goes, I'm not. I said, really? And he goes, no. He goes, I was headed down a bad path. He said, I was headed down a bad path. And he goes, this was a thump. He goes, God thumped me. And he goes, this happened to me for a reason. He goes, I don't think that God did it. He goes, it happened to me for a reason. He goes, there's always room for redemption. And I said, you're right. And so this kid has become a pretty good public speaker. And he talks about, you know, fighting back from adversity. And he's helped a ton of people. And, you know, you can't tell me that God's hand's not in that. You just can't tell me that. You can tell me, but I won't believe it. You know, so anyway, I mean, that has nothing to do with EMS really, but other than, you know, Mesa Fire did a bang up job on
Yeah.
this. But
That's awesome.
Yeah, if they hadn't intervened, I mean, that outcome certainly would have
Yeah.
been way different had they not
Yeah.
established an airway, I'm sure.
yeah, for sure. So anyway, he survived and he's doing well. And he builds every year they have a big VW show down there, and they build, they'll have competitions where they'll build these VW engines, and they will run them, and they'll open up the oil plug and run the oil out of it, and then they'll time it to see how long they'll run after that. He wins almost every time.
Interesting.
He wins, and it like by a lot.
Yeah.
It's like, what's he doing to this engine
Is
to
he
make it?
really blind? Yeah. It's like that's what they're wondering.
Yeah.
That's awesome though.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah, Gino.
So I want to kind of wrap this up with one last question for you guys. A lot of the focus of this is to help people that are feeling burned out, discouraged in emergency medicine, debating getting out of this because they don't feel like they can go back for another day. What advice would you give that person that's struggling?
EMS is like an amoeba. It really is. Changes every day. Stick around. It's going to be different tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, it's not going to be the same every day. That's the delight of EMS. You know, we've talked about some of the ways to combat burnout and, you know, how we cope and stuff. But I think that one of the things I would say is don't give up so soon. Stick with it a little bit. If you've got talent, you've got talent. And boy, it's a shame to waste that, you know, if you've got it. And you can see those people. I've seen them, you know, there's people that I've worked with that you know, they were brand new. They were working in the MMA office. And now, you know, Josh, he was one of those, and just took one look at him and went, oh, this kid's got it. I mean, he really understands this business. And I've had several of those people that were like that. And thank God that they didn't give up when it got, you know, hard, because I can't imagine the number of people's lives that they've touched, not just the patients, but the patients' families, patients' friends,
Yeah.
you know, and gosh, it's just, it boggles the mind. So I would say that my advice would be stick with it and give Casey a call if you need to, because, you know, I'm a pretty good cheerleader.
Yeah. I mean, I'd
I
sit
don't look
here.
good in a skirt. Well, maybe I do.
Actually, you
I
do. You do look good in your skirt.
You do wear
Yeah.
a kilt one.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do wear a kilt once in a while.
No, I mean, I literally agree with what you said, Casey. I mean, like I said, I've been burnt out twice. And I mean, there's been times that I wanted to quit, you know, but just like what you were saying, literally every day is different. Just because something similar happens, it's different. And then you get different reactions from helping those individuals. And it is the times that you do help somebody that actually feels nice, you know, or the times you like, you get those calls that they should be dead and then they don't. And then you're like, I helped with that. You know, it does feel nice. And then, you know, you might see that person at Walmart and then they just bawl their eyes out because you just helped their kid. You know, it feels like you're doing more than just what you're trained to do. And being burnt out is, like I said, it can happen completely. And keeping that negative feelings can really be detrimental to seeing anything positive in the job. But, you know, even something simple as seeing your trainee, like, get something click and it makes you feel nice, you know, or like on my end, like, you know, I will have like a 15-year-old just bawl her eyes out because she felt not heard. That makes me cry and that makes me feel nice. You know, it's those kinds of things that's worthwhile. Even if it's so easy to just go up to your company and say, hey, here's my 2-minute notice, bye. But also do not neglect your emotions. It's okay to not be okay. And I will gladly argue that for hours. It doesn't matter if you're woman, male, non-binary, anything. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to have emotions. Don't let anyone ever tell you that. But don't let those negative emotions be the end all be all. And again, try to stay away from the substances because that's a very easy route to go down. And it makes it worse. It does. We can make excuses saying, oh, it makes it better. But in the end, why are we drinking? You know, it's going to make it worse. So that's my 2 cents.
That's good.
Adam was here last time, and
Yeah.
he's an ER physician, and he said something that was pretty profound, actually, that I thought was anyway. When we were talking something similar, he said, "Don't dwell on those bad calls." He goes, "But try to remember the really good calls
Yeah.
that you really made a difference, and then pull off of those when you're having downtime and." When you're feeling like defeated and stuff, and just remember that you really did help somebody at one point. And if that's the drug you need, then that's a better drug than, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I borrowed that from Adam.
No.
I've thought about that a lot. And Dennis Westlink is another one that
Yeah.
said that, you know, if you get those calls all the time, he goes, but if you get that one call where you can go home, or that person can go home and be with his family or her family again, then that one call's enough. It's
Yeah.
enough.
I mean, that's why, like I said,
Yeah.
like, I don't care why I got fired
Yeah.
because that person would have died.
Yeah.
Because he was literally going to refuse us until we put on an EKG. And I'm like, he's having a fucking heart attack. So that's why, I mean, literally, just like you said, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It's enough for me.
As far as, remembering the good calls, I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
I think for me also, finding something that you're passionate about, whether it's the 75 hard, whether it's going to the gym, which is what I like to do,
Didn't
and
notice.
get some of that frustration of things that bother you out in a different way, whether that's running, working out, riding the motorcycles. Absolutely.
Damn straight.
So having things outside of work that you enjoy, which we all do anyway, but they become even that much more important with what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And having somebody to talk to is huge. Don't keep that shit to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You have a case that you think you did poorly on, or you just feel bad about how it happened. You talk to somebody, whether it's your spouse, whether it's a coworker, whether it's a therapist, and back off of work. If you're feeling burned out, the thing that probably helped me the most was cutting down a few shifts and getting rid of some responsibility so I could focus more on my outside of work life, because a lot of times what happens with burnout is you're so involved in your work life that you're starting to not be as involved in your personal life.
It takes
And
it over.
It does.
Yeah,
And that's where I was when I was feeling it. I was working too much. I was too involved, and I was too far away from my family and friends to really feel that, I was getting the good vibes outside of work rather than the bad vibes. So I think having people to talk to, increasing what you do outside of work, backing off over your work responsibilities. If you have to take a break, I mean, one thing that we've started doing at our job is we have a sabbatical month.
Yeah.
And, when I was a younger doctor, I was like, I don't need that.
Yeah.
I don't need this. Is
Yeah.
stupid. I don't want to take a month off.
Yeah.
Since we've started that a few years ago, I look forward to that month 11 months ahead of time.
Yeah.
And it is a very refreshing time to something to look forward to. So you need to have something to look forward to. We all need to have a reason to keep moving forward. You all have to have a battle to fight. You have to have something to love.
Yeah.
I definitely echo that. And I feel like a lot of people celebrate the fact they don't take their PTO. They have a full bank. They can't. And I could not be further from that. I like to save it up because you don't know what you're going to necessarily have to a degree. But I certainly ahead of time put in my time off. And I value a work-life balance that doesn't necessarily make sense to a lot of people. But I call it diversify my stress. I have 2 different jobs.
Mhm.
One is not at all stressful, but it's kind of fun and it pays really well. One is very stressful and I learn a lot. But I always in the back of my mind, I'm like, I have no shame if I want to walk away from this job. I have a lot of pride and I take a lot of enjoyment out of learning and out of the people that I can help. But I'm absolutely willing to walk away from any of this if I feel like I cannot be my true self in any of my parts of my life. And that involves keeping family as a priority, keeping enjoyment, keeping traveling, or however that most speaks to your own life. And then also just taking the time. I think what you guys were saying was really powerful, like celebrate the victories, but also write them down, because I cannot remember any of them. Like I feel like we've talked about, I kind of whitewash it all out. And in those dark moments, you can't remember anything. Everything's negative.
Mm-hmm.
It's all terrible. You need those moments of either saving the notes that have been written to you by patients or writing it down in like a journal. Like, I saved someone's life today. Or I had a patient once come up to me and I could not have placed him from Adam, and he recognized me, and I was like, what's going on? And he's just like, hey, you were my nurse. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I want to give you my 1-year AA pin. He's like,
Wow.
Good for him.
I haven't had a drink since I was in the hospital.
Good for him.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And I
Yeah.
was like, please don't give me your pin, because I want you to have this to be proud of. I will remember this.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of cool. Like, take a snapshot of those moments. Use your time off and keep that work-life balance, like you're talking about. Have something outside of work, so that when work is terrible, you have something else to fall back on, to enjoy, to be, and preferably go somewhere where your email doesn't work. So you can't, because I check it all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
But it doesn't work outside the US, so that's a positive.
Yeah, I think emergency medicine is such a difficult field that you have to be intentional about your own mental health and whatever you're doing outside of work to cope with the crazy stuff that we see. Because it's not like most jobs where I think, it's not emotionally difficult. You're not dealing with people that are dying. I mean, we see stuff truly every day that nobody else really has to see or cope with. And so I think it does require a lot of intentionality. And I think it doesn't take much time being in this field to kind of realize that. So thanks, guys, for all your advice. I'll plug 75 Hard again because I think it's phenomenal.
That's all you, bro. Let me know how it goes.
All right, guys, I'm going to jump
appreciate
in
that.
here. I want to thank everybody on the live stream. If you guys got any value out of this today, and don't worry, guys, we're going to keep talking, but if you got any value out of this today, if it resonated with you, if it encouraged you, the only thing I ask is you subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Give a 5-star review. That will help a ton. I don't make any money from this podcast and actually pay a fair amount of money to do it. So if you can support the show, that'll be very helpful. If you go to practicalems.com, you can join the email list so you know when all the episodes are coming out. There's an EKG course on there as well if you want to financially support the show. And we'll jump back into the conversation with these folks next time. Thanks, guys.